a strong lane bully, but also a drain tank who deals lots of AoE damage in teamfights. To put it frankly, he's a Darkin that wants to destroy the world. He wields a greatsword of considerable size, which many people may be a fan of, due to the similarities with, say, other characters. But if you do not care for thematics, then maybe his kit will entice you instead. Starting with his Q, Aatrox swings his sword 3 times, each swing dealing more damage than the last. Also, hitting the sweet spot of the Q provides additional damage but also knocks up the enemy. However, you are immobile while solely using your Q. But the animation can't be cancelled using CC abilities. This means that you can buffer your Q and still get your damage in, even if you might have been stunned. This works well against champions like Renekton or Set, even ganking junglers like Elise who may combo with their stun. He's still affected by displacement abilities though, but with creative thinking, you can still use this to your advantage. Now before we talk about Aatrox's W, there's something to note about his Q cooldown. Essentially, his Q cooldown restarts each time you cast a Q. This is unlike Riven's Q, whose cooldown does not restart for each cast. This means that delaying your Q casts hold no benefit, and that you're better off waiting out the cooldown if you are not in range to hit, as this in turn gives you a 4-second reduction on your Q cooldown. So, to summarize Aatrox's Q, aim for the sweet spots of the Q to knock up the enemy and deal additional damage. Your Q animation can't be cancelled so you can buffer it through stuns, and lastly, you don't need to cast Q2 or Q3 if you're not in range. Next is his W. Aatrox shoots out a projectile which slows an enemy champion and pulls them back to the center after 1.5 seconds. The pull to the center allows you to guarantee your Q damage, but generally, players will just walk out to the side to leave the tether. So what do you do? Well, players trying to escape your W will generally walk in 4 directions. So if you aim and land your Q accordingly, they'll get pulled back to the center. Now for Aatrox's E. He just dashes. Jokes aside, its main ability is letting you move during your Q. Be sure to max its second to reduce the cooldown. Aatrox E also allows him to auto-reset, combo with your W, and also animation cancel certain items. The length of the dash itself might surprise you as well. I tested it using a couple of walls on the Season 14 map, just to demonstrate some of the walls you can bypass. Next, we have Aatrox's ult. It's basically a stat boost giving move speed, AD, and also amplifying self-healing. With takedowns, the move speed refreshes and the ult duration extends. You basically press ult if you need healing, damage, or need to chase someone down in fights. You can also use it to run away. Now the ult states that it fears minions, but what you may not know is that it also fears pets. It's a minor aspect of the ult but may come in clutch against certain champions. Now for his passive. It just enhances the damage of his next auto and heals him. The animation for the passive can't be cancelled, so if you time it right, you can bypass some stuns. As for the passive cooldown, it can be reduced by landing Q, getting the hit and pull with W, and by autoing. This links to the next tip, which is auto-weaving. Auto-weaving is just using auto attacks in between your Qs. Useful for when you can't land the sweet spot of your Q. Auto-weaving gives you more damage, stacks Conqueror quicker, and reduces your passive cooldown. As stated earlier, you practically only want to auto-weave when you are unable to hit the sweet spot of your Q. The next tip involves Aatrox's Q2. If you cast Q2 diagonally, the ability will have more range than if you cast it straight at the target. This takes some practice, but is essential as it literally buffs your Q2 range if you learn it. For the final tip, we have Q Flash. It's a useful trick, but something you want to use with caution as you do burn your potential escape. Now, your Q3 does the most damage, so you'd probably want to Q3 flash, right? But your enemy probably knows this, so they'll just flash the Q3. Then you'll just look dumb and die. So instead, try opting for the Q1 flash, especially the backwards flash on unsuspecting opponents. You could also opt for the Q2 flash, just try to remember the diagonal trick though. Your other options include baiting their flash by using Q3 without flashing, or predicting their flash with the Q3 flash. That's practically all you need to know about Aatrox's abilities. So the next topic at hand is going to be runes and items. When you're playing Aatrox, you'll have two rune pages, one for your general setup and one for ranged matchups. And for educational purposes, I'm going to try and explain the rune choices. So for our general setup, we're going to start by taking Conqueror. Conqueror is easy to stack on Aatrox. Each stack gives you AD, and at max stacks, it gives you healing based on the damage you deal. The key aspects of Conqueror synergize pretty well with Aatrox's ult, which boosts bonus AD and self-healing. The next rune we're going to take is going to be Triumph. Whenever you score a takedown, Triumph will heal you based on your max HP and your missing HP. This is another rune that synergizes well with Aatrox's ult with the self-healing boost. Our next rune choice will be a Legend Alacrity for the attack speed. This rune will help you with your damage, but it also helps with farming. As for Legend Haste, you don't actually need this rune. The items you build as Aatrox usually provide you with enough ability haste. The last rune we're going to take on the precision tree is going to be Last Stand. The damage boost from Last Stand can be greater than Coup, and Aatrox is kind of a frontline champion, so you'll be below half HP quite often, which makes Last Stand the most optimal rune choice here for Aatrox. For our secondary rune path, we're going to start by taking the Resolve tree. Your first rune here will either be Conditioning, Second Wind, or Bone Plating. Second Wind is for general matchups. Bone Plating is for specific matchups, which I will explain in a minute, and Conditioning is for when you're experienced in tank matchups, as generally, tanks don't play for the laning phase. Cassante and Malphite are exceptions to this rule, however. Take Second Wind against these champions, otherwise they will poke you out of lane. You will lose. The final rune we're going to take is Overgrowth. It's a rune that gives you max HP / bonus HP when you've killed enough monsters or minions. This can provide you with a bigger Styrax shield, but it can also give you more AD if you go Bruiser and build Overlord's Bloodmail. For our rune shards, we're going to start by taking Double Adaptive Force. This just gives you AD. Then you can take base HP if you need it for the early game, Tenacity for non-knockup heavy CC comps, and Scaling HP if you're confident about the laning phase. Now the next question is, when do you take Bone Plating and when do you take Second Wind? Well, you'll want to opt for Bone Plating against champs that want to all-in you. Champs like Renekton, Set, Darius, and Riven. Bone Plating here acts as another layer of protection. They have to pop your Bone Plating before they can actually do an all-in. Otherwise, they'll get a large amount of the damage blocked. Just try to not let them proc it for free though. For example, Darius can just proc your Bone Plating with Q, which means your Bone Plating will block minimal damage. As Aatrox, you'd much rather have Darius E when you have Bone Plating up, as when he auto-W autos you, you'd block the most damage with your Bone Plating. But if you're not playing against these kind of champs, then just take Second Wind. Next, we have the Ranged Matchup rune page. So to start off, we'll go into Sorcery and take Comet. The reason you opt for Comet instead of Conqueror, against ranged champs you'll practically never be able to stack Conqueror. And Comet synergizes well with the knockouts from Aatrox's Q and the slow from his W, meaning you'll practically always hit the Comet. Next, you can opt for Nullifying Orb against AP champs like Kennen and Teemo, as it gives a little magic shield when you're low on HP. Otherwise, take Nimbus Cloak, as it gives you move speed when you use a summoner spell. After that, the next rune choice will probably be Transcendence. The ability haste you get from the rune is nice, and the ability cooldown reduction can come in clutch. The final rune on the sorcery tree that you want to take is Scorch. This helps in poking the enemy out of lane and even potentially killing them. For the secondary rune buff, you'll want to take Resolve. Then you'll want to opt for Second Wind and Revitalize, as you'll mainly be getting poked in these matchups. Second Wind heals you when you get hit and is based on your missing HP. For your rune shards, just take Double Adaptive Force and base HP. The attack speed shard has a lower value as you'll practically never auto your opponent in these matchups. Alright, so next we have items. Now, the problem with items is that they get nerfed or buffed almost every patch. And maybe you're watching this from a future patch, so the builds might have changed. So, to sort of future-proof this guide, I came up with two methods. The first method would be to look at websites like LOLalytics for the win rate on item builds. Don't forget to sort by rank though. And the second method would be to look at accounts of good players. I personally look at NAAYIL's and Minjae's accounts. I'll put their op.gg's in the description. This method is fine as long as the players don't quit. Or you know, they just die. We can start by talking about Doran's Shield and Doran's Blade. Now, you can take Doran's Shield into 90% of matchups and be fine. The healing from Doran's Shield means that you don't get punished too much from the short trades of early game. As for Doran's Blade, the only real matchup that you need to take Doran's Blade in is Irelia. The main reason being that Doran's Blade helps you win the level 1 before she gets full stacks on the wave. Now I'd say you can take Doran's Blade into other matchups once you have more experience in them, but ultimately Doran's Shield is a safer bet when starting out. Next up we have Boots. A basic rule is Steel Caps against AD champs and Mercs against AP champs. If your enemy is AD and likes to auto attack a lot, then Steel Caps is especially good to rush as first item. If you're getting CC'd for long durations and you don't have tenacity and runes, then build Mercs. As for Lucidity Boots, only go them when they have a lot of mixed damage on the enemy team and they don't auto attack a lot. Now for some champion specific items. Rush Hexdrinker against AP burst champs like a Rumble and a Kali. Executioners against champs that heal a lot, but if their healing is conditional and hard to hit, you don't need to build this. Now we can talk about the two builds that are currently usable. You can either build like a tanky Bruiser or you can build Lethality. The core of these builds are Sundered Sky and Profane Hydra. Don't forget you can cancel Profane's animation with E, and it deals more damage to targets below 50% HP. Now currently both builds are equal in weight. Lethality gives you more damage at the sacrifice of tankiness, and Bruiser is vice versa. You can't frontline as Lethality, so you'll need to flank a lot more. But anyways, let's start with the Bruiser build. As an example, let's say you've built Boots already. You'd first want to build Eclipse or Black Cleaver if you're playing against tanks. Then you would build Sundered Sky. After that, it's Aatrox or more if you're playing against heavy AP. Then you would build Overlord's Bloodmail. For your last item, you can finish off your Executioners, you can go Spirit Surge or another defensive option. For the Lethality build, you'd first build Eclipse for melee or straight to Profane if you're playing against ranged. Then, depending on what you've built, you can go Profane or Edge of Night. The next item will be Soroda's Grudge for damage and Aatrox or more as a defensive option. You would then proceed to build which one you didn't build first. Your last item would then be Opportunity for damage, finishing your Executioners, or you can go a defensive option. I would recommend going offensive instead of defensive items for the Lethality build. Now before we talk about laning phase, let's talk about summoners. You should always take TP and Flash. The only matchup that you could take Ignite over TP is Darius, and this is because he runs Ghost. TP is better for late game though, and Ignite runs the risk of you getting punished early by getting ganked. Now with runes and items out of the way, we can finally start talking about laning phase. Let's get into it. So, first things first, you can press Ctrl 5 to open your wings. Second thing, the outside bushes are scary. This is because certain champs like Darius like to cheese you here and zone you off the first 3 minions or even kill you. So if you're playing against those champs, be sure to ward these bushes. Now you can actually start laning by threatening the enemy with your passive. You can't do this against every champ though. After that, you can just start hitting them with your Q. Just remember that your Q has a long cooldown and you are immobile at level 1. Certain enemies may take advantage of this, so you can just not use your Q3. They need to be aware of the threat of Q3 and you get reduced cooldown at the same time. For level 2, you want to take E. But in some niche cases where you have your level 2 and the enemy is immobile, you can take W instead. Now, using this same clip, I'm going to show you what I did wrong. You see, your W is a pretty useless spell by itself, so only use it when your Q is about to come up or is up. Now once you hit level 3, you can start doing combos. But I quickly want to preface this segment by telling you that QE is the worst combo opener. For one, you've just used your dash, so champs like Darius will all in you. You also can't hit your Q2 unless they mess up or you use your flash. Other than this, QE is okay if you're near your tower or you're trying to poke the enemy. Now Aatrox combos have a lot of variety, so I'll show them here. Keep in mind that players will try to leave the W, so aim accordingly and they'll get pulled back in. Also remember to weave in your passive auto whenever you can. Each combo has their unique parts. For example, this one starts with EW, while this combo here allows you to capture a backline enemy. This combo is for if you can't hit your sweet spot, so you auto-weave instead. This combo involves Q flashing backwards. This combo involves Q flashing forwards and using Tiamat. Here's just the combo for just involving Tiamat. And this combo involves weaving your ult in. As does this one. The final combo involves weaving your ult and Tiamat in. Last things to note are that your Q doesn't reveal you in bushes, so they're great for starting combos. And that your Q2 is not bad for starting tower dives. Now laning can be heavily influenced by the champion matchups. You can always watch videos on the two I suggested earlier to learn these matchups. The other option would be to search up the matchups on YouTube. There's plenty of videos. And so we reach the final part of the video. Let's talk about mid to late game. This part of the game will be dictated more by your macro or your map choices to say. Like in this game where I'm pushing a side lane while having TP up for the Drake fight. If you have a lead like me, then you can take jungle camps, you can kill your lane opponent, or you can even take side lane towers to further your lead. If you're behind, then farming by your tower and catching waves is a good start. If your team is fighting and you deem that they need you to turn the tide, then join fights or TP if you need to. You can pick up a few kills and it might bring you back into the game. I also want to emphasize on saving your TP for team fights. Aatrox has a huge amount of AoE damage with his Q, which is why he shines the brightest in team fights or skirmishes. And having TP means that you get to join more team fights, without losing too much CS on the sideline. Your best combination of abilities in team fights will be your Q2 plus E. This combination of abilities has wide range while also having substantial damage. But with this talk about team fights, you're not bad in the side lane. Outside of the usual lane fighting, Aatrox is very good at trapping. With the bush trick I showed you earlier, Aatrox is pretty good at catching people off guard. Getting late game picks like on this Corki will allow your team to fight team fights much better, or allow your team to secure objectives. Scanner will help you clear vision and will help you a lot in this. If you've gone the lethality build, then flanking can be especially lethal, no pun intended. Once again, using vision plants or using scanner will help you with these flanks. Getting the catch on your enemies with this build can be game saving or game ending. I do hope you've enjoyed watching this guide. I hope that you decide to pick up Aatrox and maybe end some worlds.